Let's begin today's Vanguard news with showing off the last ride line for Dark States and EZBT-03, so we can finally talk about sharpening your pointy pencils while stargazing next month. Innocent Invitation Ralalapacoco is your typical D-series starter that'll make you think you're facing against a lyrical Monasteria deck. Welcoming Flower Basket Hop Pop while on Vanguard at the beginning of your ride phase lets you ride Debauchery Feasting Shafi from your ride deck, then both players draw a card and you cannot ride until the end of turn. The last time an ability that makes both players draw at the same time, it became a deck out strategy in Premium. Debauchery Feasting Shafi, when ridden over by one who governs Ritual Sacrifice Glass, lets you pay 1 Soul Blast to add up to 1 Sweet Bait card from your deck. And when she's placed on rear guard, add a grade 3 or higher Grand Dogma card from your damage zone to your hand. Then put a card in your hand to your damage zone. If you added a card with this ability, I haven't fully read the Cray Cross Epic lore, but this deck is looking like someone in the novel was invited to a tea party and had one major acid trip based on this card's name and design. The fact there's needles stuck in those cakes should have been a red flag. One who governs Ritual Sacrifice Glass while on Vanguard at the start of your main phase gives you an effect that makes you charge 1 energy every time your opponent's Regard or Guardian are retired, and while on Vanguard you can pay 4 energy at the end of the battle it attacked to ride a manifested Greater Being Grand Dogma from your deck hand or drop zone, and that unit gets 15k power but loses 2 drive checks, and your opponent may draw a card if you rode a card with this ability. Take note, this will let you charge 1 energy per guardian your opponent uses, since they all get retired at the end of the battle they were placed on the guardian circle. Anal Beadman is indeed an acid trip, since it's just a proxy for the real boss of the deck, that being Manifested Greater Being Grand Dogma gets put into the drop zone when she's bound by your card ability that isn't by her own ability. Once per turn while on Vanguard, you retire one of your opponent's rear guards at the end of the battle she attacked. You retire another rear guard if you have 1 or more copies of this card in your bind zone, and she stands if you have 2 or more copies of this card in your bind zone. And while on Vanguard, you ride one who governs Ritual Sacrifice Glass from your soul at the end of your turn in rest state. If your bind zone has 1 or less copies of this card in your bind zone, then bind this card if you rode with this ability. If you're still confused about her first ability, anything that binds her besides her own ability makes her go to the drop zone instead. This is a failsafe, so players can't speed up their bind zone by putting copies of this card with other abilities. The only time she can become a Vaga clone is on your 5th turn. Sweet Bait is a normal order card that can only be played by paying 1 counter blast that lets you perform one of the 2 abilities based on your Vanguard. If your Vanguard is Sacrifice Glass, your opponent gets an effect where it remove all their rear guards and cards in the drop zone's continuous and auto abilities cannot gain them back, and they cannot move rear guards to the Guardian Circle for that turn. But your opponent calls 3 cards from their drop zone. And if your Vanguard is Grand Dogma, you activate Persona Ride. If your Vanguard was not placed during your ride phase, then return all non-heal or over trigger in your drop zone back to your deck. I'm now convinced that Bushier Roads R&D have planned each new release to counter the previous sets, since this won't let you use the set order cards from DZSS01 to guard with your back row rear guards. This also makes building Blank Maya feel like a waste of money, and this made Raziel's Divine Skill feel obsolete in comparison, especially when you can keep returning your triggers as long as you have a copy of this order card. Miasma River Beast Miradora once per turn while on rear guard lets you pay 1 Soul Blast and a discard to give a Sweet Bait in your drop zone a continuous ability that lets you play it from your drop zone, but it's put to the bottom of your deck after being played. And while on rear guard at the end of your turn, you can pay 5 energy to draw a card, ignoring the second skill as it's more of a way to use your surplus of energy. This card made my earlier statement about returning triggers multiple times a reality. This also makes famed Blazing Demonic Lady Orines really good, since you play order cards in this deck a lot. Glad I grabbed a playset for my Chrono Jet that I never used. Time to cash in. Finally, Eternal Musician Muji, while on the front row rear guard makes you retire one of your opponent's rear guards when your grade 3 or higher Sacrifice Glass Vanguard attacks. And while on rear guard, it gets 10k power when your grade 3 or higher Grand Dogma Vanguard attacks. Either a free retire or free 10k to 20k power on top of what the deck already does. How the hell is this fair? No wonder the deck makes your opponent draw a card or calls free units. It knows that all of its abilities are stupidly good. And that concludes this Vanguard news without the bullshit. Special thanks to my Patreon members for continuing to support my content creation. Be sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments how you can't stop thinking that Grand Dogma is figuratively and literally sitting on sacrifice glass.